have to fear is
In war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power."
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. Visit online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. It's Thursday, so it's Foundations of Freedom Thursday. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton, and that means we're going to be talking about the Constitution, the Declaration, other founding documents, and the principles upon which our nation was built, and we're going to be taking your questions. David, Thursdays are always great because we get to look to the past to find out what made America so great and protect that greatness going into the future.
And I love these because, as we commented, over the recent years, we're getting stronger and stronger questions on more and more depth into our history. I mean, it used to be really simple stuff because Americans knew so little about who we were. We teach our history so abysmally at government schools anymore that we don't even know what's going on. But it is really striking that the kind of questions we're getting really do indicate a depth. And it's not like the questions are, let's stump the host kind of stuff. This is stuff, hey, I was reading and I just saw this document and I wondered about this and I saw a professor say this or I saw something on the History Channel say this. And so it really is good that people are paying attention, they're watching, and some of the stuff just doesn't pass the smell test, it doesn't feel right, and so they ask. And it's really been wonderful these last couple of years just on the way that the questions that we get indicate that the growth that's happening in the nation. I think that's wonderful.
No, it's fantastic, and it really is a sign of sort of that Josiah moment where everybody's saying, hey, this is who I'm beginning to learn who we were as a nation. I'm beginning to see the transformation that's taking place. I don't like where the country's headed, so I'm willing to do some homework and figure out how to get our nation turned around. Great question. This is a very new topic for us from Jeremy Gordon, one of our listeners. He said, I recently read the Declaration of Arms that was written a year before the Declaration of Independence. Like what it said, but I don't understand what its purpose was and what this document was for. So, David, most people probably never heard of this one. It's actually pretty interesting just to find out who was responsible for it and what was going on at the time. So what is the Declaration of Arms?
Yeah, this question is exactly one of those we're talking about because this is a really significant founding document. And I don't know that in reviewing textbooks over the last number of years that I've even seen this document mentioned in those textbooks, but it is a really significant document. The people involved with it are very significant people. For example, I just got back last night from 3 days in Washington, D.C., just met with a bunch of congressmen, and we were over at the Capitol. In the Capitol, people look at that picture in the rotunda of the Capitol of the presenting of the Declaration of Independence to Congress, and they often say, that's the signers of the Declaration. And yeah, kinda, but not really. There's several guys, there's a half a dozen guys in that picture that John Trumbull painted into the picture, and John Trumbull knew these guys. I mean, his father was the governor of Connecticut. He was General George Washington's aide-de-camp in the Revolution. He knew these guys. These were like photographs, if you will, because he knew them. And he put several people in there around the Declaration of Independence that did not sign that document. And you're going, why would he do that? What did he not know who signed? Of course he knew who signed. But you have one of the five guys who's assigned to help write the Declaration. You have Robert Livingston. I mean, there he is at the table, laying the Declaration on the table to Congress, the Committee of Five, and he didn't sign the document. And it's not because he didn't support it, because he voted for it. But one of the things that a lot of people don't recognize is when they voted for this on the 4th of July and approved the wording of the Declaration, they didn't sign it then. Only two folks signed it at that point in time, and those two folks were John Hancock, the President of Congress, and Charles Thompson, the Secretary of Congress. It wasn't until the 17th of July that they made a motion that, hey, why don't we all get a really big one? We can all put our names on it. And they loved it. And so the 2nd of August, they signed it. Well, in the meantime, Robert Livingston from New York, he approved the Declaration. He helped write the Declaration. He votes for the Declaration. He doesn't sign it because his state of New York calls him home and says, we need you to head up the entire judicial system in New York. Now that we're no longer a British colony, now that we're in a free, independent American colony. We need to start our own American judicial system, and you're the head of it. So he had to head on. Another guy from New York, same thing. It's over on the left side of that famous picture is a guy named George Clinton. And he voted for it, and he's a strong supporter of the Declaration, but he never got to sign it because New York again called him home and said, hey, we want you to get the entire military set up in our new state. We've had British stuff. Now you're the head, so you take this. And so several guys like that. And one of the guys that appears there is the guy over on the right side of that famous painting, and it's a guy named John Dickinson. And John Dickinson, very prominently featured there, he didn't sign the Declaration, and he didn't vote for the Declaration. I mean, he didn't want to separate from Great Britain. He thought it might come. And by the way, once it did come, he became a general in the Revolutionary Army, general under George Washington. So he clearly is not anti-American in this, but he didn't think it was the right time for the Declaration. He still thought there were other things we could and should be doing. And so he helped move us to that point. And one of the ways he helped move us to that point is this question has been asked on this Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms. He's one of the primary authors of this, and this was done almost a year to the day before the Declaration of Independence. It was done on the 6th of July, 1775. So it is a really significant document that we can talk about when we come back.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to learn more about this one. Thanks to Jeremy Gordon for a great question, by the way. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Our founding fathers, despite their common love for America, did not always agree with each other in politics. Such was the case between John and Samuel Adams. John was the leader of the Federalist Party, and Samuel was a leader of the Anti-Federalist Party. Consequently, political disagreements were not unusual between these two. On October the 4th, 1790, Sam wrote John and told him, "Let ministers and philosophers, statesmen and patriots unite their endeavors to renovate the age by educating their little boys and girls and leading them in the study and practice of the exalted virtues of the Christian system." 2 weeks later, John wrote back and told Samuel that on this issue they both agreed. While these two prominent founding fathers disagreed on much, they both agreed on the importance of educating the next generation in the principles of Christianity.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. If we're going to overthrow men that are perverting the Constitution, we have to know those founding principles. We actually had a question today here on Foundations of Freedom Thursday about a document before the Constitution and before the Declaration of Independence. A declaration of arms a year before the Declaration. And David, before the break, you were telling us about how that there were guys in the painting of the signing of the Declaration that didn't actually sign. One of those gentlemen, John Dickinson, you were talking about.
Yeah, and Dickinson's a significant figure, and he, with Thomas Jefferson, really kind of authored this document, the Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms. Now, if you take that title, Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms, and reduce it, you're saying, all right, here's the reasons, here's the causes, and here's why we would be required to take up arms. This is sent to the British ministry. This is sent to the Crown themselves, to King George III. This is sent to all the officials in Great Britain because that is our government. I mean, we are still British citizens. At this point, none of the colonies would have voted for separation from Great Britain. And so in this document, they do what they've been doing all along. Now, I think they made some bad assumptions here as it turned out, but they made it with the right attitude. And what they do is they say, look, we are in a situation where that we have certain guaranteed written down rights that come to us as British citizens. We have the Magna Carta. We have a British Bill of Rights. We have certain guarantees that go to every Briton. Every person in Britain gets these guarantees. And what we're finding is that we're being denied the exercise of these guarantees. It'd be the same today as if we said, hey, the government's violating the Bill of Rights. We have a right to keep and bear arms. We have a right to freedom of speech. We have a right to freedom of religion. It's the government that's violating this. That's where people get upset, and that's exactly where they were. And so this said that, you have now sent your own troops against us. We had the Boston Massacre where you fired on our guys. We had Lexington and Concord, where you sent 700 British troops, and we only had 70 at Lexington, and you attacked us there and shot 18 of us. And so we have these written guarantees that come with our nation. It's our written documents. And you're sending troops over here and forcing a violation of what is written. You can't do that. And so what they lay out in this is that we think King George III is still a good king. We support him. We want to be British citizens. We want to be part of Great Britain. But we think that there's some people in the Crown Ministry, and that's kind of like that's kind of like our cabinet secretaries. They say we believe there's some people in the Crown Ministry that are really corrupt around him, and they're doing things that violate the written laws that we have in Britain, and we don't think the king knows about it. So we want to tell the king what's going on. So they send this document. It's really directed at King George III, but it says, hey, and it would be people like Lord North and some of those others, the foreign secretary, that were very, very, very hard-fisted toward America. And so what they're doing is that we're going to take up arms and we're going to fight for our rights. I mean, that's what we had to do at Lexington. That's what we had to do at Concord. We'll do this. We're not starting this. We want it to end. And we're appealing to the king, but we're just telling you that we will defend our rights. If you come after us the same way you did at Lexington and Concord, we'll do that. But we don't want to separate. We want this reconciled. And king, you need to know you got some bad guys around you. So that's the essence of what they're saying. There is a cause and necessity for taking up arms. We do this reluctantly. We're not looking to start a revolution. We don't want a revolution. We like being British citizens. We want to continue to be that. But as it turns out, King George III was fully cognizant of what was going on. So their appeal really kind of fell on deaf ears. They did this. They sent the olive branch petition not long afterwards, also saying, hey, we want to reconcile. And it was the king who really had the hard heart in this thing, who wanted to answer by sending 25,000 British troops. So that's the importance of this document. That's the importance of John Dickinson. Dickinson still thought there was a way we could reconcile, which is why he didn't sign the Declaration. Now, he's willing to stand up and defend. And as I mentioned, once we signed the Declaration, he jumps wholeheartedly on board. He becomes a revolutionary general. He becomes the governor of two states. He becomes the governor of Delaware and the governor of Pennsylvania. So he's a great patriot. But he and Thomas Jefferson did this document, and it's worth everyone reading this document because it is a precursor to the Declaration, but it sets the right tone and attitude. And for folks out there who say God could never bless the American Revolution because it was an act of rebellion and disobedience and defiance, that just proves they haven't read documents like this, which set forth a totally different tone.
And he was, he was involved from the beginning to the end of the whole revolutionary period, wasn't he? I mean, he helped draft the Articles of Confederation. He signs the Constitution, right? He was a big part of that, and actually even provided some of the language for the First Amendment. Is that right? Yeah, well, he did. And back in 1768, he's already writing national letters from Pennsylvania farmer that were really huge. That's after we've gone through the Stamp Act controversy, and here come the Intolerable Acts, and here come the Quartering Acts, and here come all these British acts that are taking away more and more rights. And so he writes letters from Pennsylvania farmer. I mean, we actually have the originals of those, and he writes those letters explaining, no, guys, we got to stand up for our rights. We are British citizens. These are British guaranteed rights. These are rights written down. You can't allow anyone to violate these. So, he's been in this thing for a number of years, and we just don't know much about John Dickinson today, but he is a great hero, great patriot. Got to take a very quick break. Jeremy Gordon, thank you for your question about the Declaration of Arms. Hope a lot of folks out there, I learned a lot right there, and I hope you did as well. We got another question coming at you on Foundations of Freedom Thursday when we return here on WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, "In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief by the chains of the Constitution."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. At the time of the American Revolution, numerous other nations also had revolutions, yet 200 years later, America is the only of those nations still under its original form of government. Is this just good luck? Not according to Founding Father Benjamin Rush. He declared, "I do not believe that the Constitution was the offspring of inspiration, but I am as perfectly satisfied that it is as much the work of a divine providence as any of the miracles recorded in the Old and New Testament." George Washington agreed. In fact, he declared, "I should be pained to believe that the United States have forgotten that divine interposition which was so often manifested during our Revolution, or that they fail to consider the omnipotence of that God who is alone able to protect them. Our founders acknowledged that our national success had come from God."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states, and of the United States, assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday, so we're diving into your questions about our Founding Fathers and our founding documents. Next question comes from Britton Croft. It's about women's suffrage. So here's the question. Hello, Mr. Barton and Mr. Green. Women's suffrage is confusing to me. I don't believe our nation's framers were so sexist that women were not given the right to vote. In my study of the Constitution, I haven't seen anything suggesting that women can't vote. What I believe was the case focused more on a biblical principle: a house divided cannot stand. Not that women did not have the right to vote. It's more that the husband's vote was supposed to represent that household. That is, how the husband voted is where the family stood on those issues. Would you mind addressing this in one of your programs? I just don't believe that they were sexist as we're told today. I really want to know the truth so I can share it with friends and family who have discussed it in the past. Great question, David. I don't know the answer to this one. I always jokingly say women's suffrage was actually because the men were suffering because they wouldn't let their wives vote, and therefore they said, yes, ma'am, and changed that. But going all the way back to the founding era, what do you think about that? That it was really the husband's vote was the vote for the whole house?
This is a brilliant question because it does not assume that the way things are today is the way things were then. And she's exactly right. The family was the first and the fundamental unit of all government. Well, actually, you have individual self-government first, then you have family government second, you have civil government third, you have church government fourth. Those are the four levels of government in the order they are given in the Bible. So family government precedes civil government. And you watch that as colonists came to America, they voted by families. You look at the Pilgrims. When they finally moved away from socialism and moved toward that free enterprise system, they called the families together and gave families plots of land, private property given to the families. And so that's the way things worked. And you have to remember back then, husband and wife, the two were considered one. That is the biblical precept. That's the way they looked at them in the civil community. That is a family that is voting. And so the head of the family was traditionally considered to be the husband, and even biblically still continues to be so. And in happy homes today, the husband's still the head of the home, although he has learned to say, yes, dear, happy wife is a happy life. Phil Robertson, happy, 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 all that. You know that. The husband is still the head of the family, but not in the theocratic kind of a mold or aristocratic or any kind of a tyrannical or despotic mold. That's just where God put the responsibility. As we've often said in military, every individual in the military has an equal worth, equal value, just that some hold different ranks than others, and that doesn't mean they're worth more than someone. Someone that's a sergeant is not worth more than someone that's a private. He has a different rank, but they're equally important. And so that was the position they held. Now, because of that, you have to understand that the family unit was so secure that in following the biblical and traditional principles, you didn't break up the family. And so we talked today about, somebody gets really frustrated, said, it'll take an act of Congress to do that. Well, that's what it took to break up a family back then. It literally took an act of the legislature to get a divorce. So divorce is so easy today. It's been so easy since no-fault divorce went in back in the 60s. For any reason, for no reason. You can separate today, not back then. It took an act of the legislature, and it had to be such a significant breach in the home that the legislature was willing to recognize that and allow the divorce. And the legislature looked at it because the Bible only gives just a handful of causes for divorce. And if it wasn't one of those causes, it wasn't one of those biblical reasons the Bible allowed, then the legislature didn't do it. So she's thinking right in terms of thinking, well, this is a family. The other thing that stands out in voting is not only did they vote as families, but property ownership was really significant. And I'll tell you why that's important for men and women when we come back.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us, folks. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts. Not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
Hey, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And as you've had the opportunity to listen to WallBuilders Live, you've probably heard the wealth of information about our nation. about our spiritual heritage, about the religious liberties, about all the things that makes America exceptional. And you might be thinking, as incredible as this information is, I wish there was a way that I could get one of the WallBuilders guys to come to my area and share with my group, whether it be a church, whether it be a Christian school or public school or some political event or activity. If you're interested in having a WallBuilder speaker come to your area, you can get on our website at www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a tab for scheduling. And if you'll click on that tab, you'll notice there's a list of information from speakers' bios to events that are already going on, and there's a section where you can request an event to bring this information about who we are, where we came from, our religious liberties and freedoms. Go to the WallBuilders website and bring a speaker to your area.
Let the torch of freedom
President Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
No doubt about it. Welcome back to WallBuilders Live, and great quote by Coolidge. By the way, not only a great privilege for men, but as Brooks and Dunn would say in their song, and women too. David, I think this question is right. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says only men can vote. In fact, the issue is not even brought up till the 19th Amendment that says you can't discriminate based on sex. You're saying back in the founding era, it was basically the family unit. What about some of the colonies actually allowed women to vote all the way back in the 1790s, right?
Well, before that, back in the 1640s, and it was
really?
Yeah, it was based on the fact that the family unit is represented. So to vote, you had to be a family unit, and you had to also own property, because again, they were not going to let non-property owning people vote on what property owning people should do with their property. Since so much,
I wish we still did that.
Exactly right. Since so much income comes from property taxes for most states, to allow people who don't own any property to tell, well, you guys who do own property, here's what you're going to pay for me, and I want this program, that
and to regulate it, right?
And to
tell you what you can do with it.
And to regulate property. So they wanted you to have skin in the game. If you didn't have skin in the game, you're not voting. So what they did was they established different procedures, but because there were single women who might own land, they could vote, because you're looking at a family unit. For example, you go back into the 1640s, you have Margaret Brent in Maryland, who was already voting back in the 1640s. She's a landowner. She also actually was an attorney and appeared in court cases to argue court cases. Out of New York, you got folks like Deborah Moody. That's back in 1655, already voting in the Netherlands, but she's representing a family unit, and she owns the property. And by the way, Founding Fathers didn't make it hard to own property. They just want you to have skin in the game. If you're in Pennsylvania, property was 1 penny an acre. 1 penny an acre. It's easy to own property, but you got to have skin in this game. Lydia Tuft out of Massachusetts. I mean, she was voting in the 1750s during the French and Indian War. Her son was out fighting. Her family was gone, and so she's there. Well, she represents the family. She votes. In New Jersey, take the Constitution of New Jersey. Okay. The Constitution of New Jersey, when they framed the New Jersey Constitution in 1776, it gave the right to vote to, quote, all inhabitants of this colony of full age who are worth 50 pounds and have resided within the county for 12 months. Guess what? Lots of women voted then. That they have that 50 pounds of worth. In other words, they got skin in the game. They've resided in the county. They voted.
And you did say worth 50 pounds, not weighs 50 pounds,
exactly.
Right?
That's right.
Just making sure.
Worth 50 pounds, not weighed 50 pounds. Well said, bro.
All right, just checking.
That's it. But the point is, there was a lot of women voting going on. Now, as we've moved more away from the family unit, and you need to be independent from family, and don't be chained down and be a mother, and don't be chained down and be a father, and don't be chained down to your parents. And, we've moved into more of a family anarchy kind of thing, the modern family kind of portrayal. That understanding has gone away. But I mean, clearly, what Brenton has asked is a brilliant question, because it does reveal that the bigotry we're told that they held back then, they didn't hold. And what they did was they put the family unit higher than the government unit, and they tried to work hard to keep the family together. And as we can show in 200 or 300 studies since then, the more you weaken the family, the more it hurts the entire culture and society. So they had a strong culture, strong society, and it was based on a strong family that preceded government, and they crafted their policies to protect a strong family.
David, I had not ever even thought about, made this connection to when you often talk about how in the founding era they looked at everybody the same. They didn't put us in all these special rights groups and separate everybody by these groups. And when I look at even the, Article 1, when it talks about voting, you're going to be chosen in the second year by the people of the several states. So even then it was treating everybody equal from the beginning.
Yeah, see, the states are the ones that are allowed to do voting things. And even the Constitution Day, it's the states that set up the procedures for voting and how you vote and how you choose president and electoral and everything else. So that was not a federal power. That was a state power. And for example, in 1809, New Jersey came in to their own constitution that let women vote and said, hey, we've decided we just want white males to vote. Well, that wasn't in their original constitution, and that got changed later. So there's times that states step in and they will try to raise a barrier, but people knock that barrier back down. And so it was added to the federal constitution because some states were not allowing that to happen, but other states had been allowing it to happen since the very beginning, back in the 1640s. So really the move to do it as a federal level is the move to say, well, there's a few states out here that haven't got this yet, so let's do it for them. But this really was something that was going on from the very, very beginning.
And that attitude, I think, also allowed for us to continually become that more perfect union once, getting rid of slavery, making those equal rights apply to everyone. But that foundation had to be laid and built from the beginning. And as you said, within the family unit.
Family. That's right.
One thing we seem to be destroying so much right now. Thanks for joining us today. It's been Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live.
Samuel Adams said, "The liberties of our country and the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending against all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attack."
We stand undivided.